Game Changers is IGN's look at the people behind the games that changed the industry. Presented by Cup Noodles, supporting those just warming up for something bigger.
In the late 1990s, Interplay Entertainment revolutionized the role-playing game genre with Fallout and Baldur's Gate. RPGs had been around from the very earliest days of gaming, but they mostly focused on recreating tabletop RPG systems to tell linear stories. Fallout and Baldur's Gate showed that video games could offer previously unimagined opportunities for storytelling, player choice, and simulation. Fallout and Baldur's Gate were developed in parallel with each other. Fallout began as an experimental side project at Interplay, while Baldur's Gate was an outsider effort by a group of inexperienced Dungeons & Dragons fans.
This was back at the start of BioWare, and Ray and Greg had founded the company BioWare, and they were helping to get a game called Shattered Steel published with Interplay.
And it was called Metal Hive at the time, and then it became Shattered Steel. And I was put on as the producer on it.
But they really wanted to make a role-playing game because they were big fans of role-playing games, and Interplay had got the Dungeons & Dragons license and wanted to do something with it.
BioWare started working on their RPG passion project and quickly found an ally in Urquhart. But the rest of Interplay took some convincing.
I then went to my boss and I pitched him on. He said, that's stupid. Okay, it was a longer conversation than that, but he told me it was dumb.
Urquhart wasn't ready to give up. He went to Interplay's marketing vice president to pitch this strange game from a group of medical doctors and their friends.
Went over and I just told her, look, it's DirectX. DirectX was new. Look at all the graphics look awesome. We can take this, it can be about a party, and D&D is about parties and this. And she's like, I get it. And she's let me see it. So I went over, showed it to her, and then she just called Brian Fargo, said, you have to come see this. And he said, okay. And he came up, I think I talked for like 45 seconds. He said, sign it. And that was it. That was the start of Baldur's Gate.
Go for the eyes, Boo! Go for the eyes!
Meanwhile, within Interplay, a young programmer named Tim Kaine was working on a game of his own and trying to get his coworkers to help him.
Around 6 or 7 o'clock, I would order pizzas and go to the conference room, and I'd send out an email saying, if anyone wants to talk about this game I'm working on, I'll be in the conference room eating pizza. You're welcome to come by and join me. And I really thought dozens of people would come by, but instead it was only about 5 or 6 people. What it turned out I did, without realizing I was doing at the time, is I ended up attracting the 5 or 6 most passionate people at work.
Both teams had passion, but they lacked experience. That opened the door for the kind of outside-the-box, ambitious thinking that made Fallout and Baldur's Gate so special.
I think the fact that not a single person had any experience making video games probably had a huge influence on the success of Baldur's Gate, because we didn't know what was possible and what was impossible.
That brings with it a certain amount of naivety, but it also gives you an interesting sort of viewpoint in that you don't necessarily know what you shouldn't be doing.
For the fallen!
Both teams were reconsidering how games would react to players and how player choice could shape their experience in powerful ways.
I like to think that Fallout changed the way RPG makers approached open worlds, that they got rid of the idea of hard and fast good and evil, that they sort of embraced let the player do something, make him own the consequences of his actions, so track what the player does more. I think before that, RPGs didn't really do that. They had a storyline that you went along, but the storyline was kind of already pre-made.
Where Fallout cultivated its twisted world and its subversive tone, Baldur's Gate was driven by the idea of the classic RPG adventuring party.
The Baldur's Gate game for me was the first one that captured the sense of a group, of a party. That was to me what really set it apart. Your companion characters had personality and they reacted to what you did, and it made me feel like I was in a group of friends playing the game. Even though I was alone, it let me do it anytime I wanted.
For the Fallout team, consequences and choice were more about building systems and possibilities into the simulation itself. It was a pioneer effort in emergent gameplay before the term even existed. Naturally, the team behind Fallout took it in some extreme directions, like when they realized the pickpocket skill could be used to attach live munitions to NPCs.
QA was using it to take a grenade, pull the pin, and place it in an NPC's inventory and then run away.
The dark humor of the Fallout team and the world they built was also something that set Fallout apart. When most video games were telling classic good versus evil stories, with the good guys triumphant in the end, Fallout was embracing a more nuanced point of view.
A perfect example of that is the original ending for Fallout was supposed to be you come back to the vault after you've had all your adventures and you have a big party. and they celebrate you coming back.
It occurred to me, you know, that the people in the vault were very xenophobic, and there was no way they were letting you back in.
And I was like, nobody's going to accept that. Nobody's going to accept that when you finish the game, your reward is being kicked out of the vault. But we went with that ending, and people loved it.
And to me, that's the thing that we really wanted people to take away, was this deep emotional experience. Without getting too deep into like, oh, this is such a serious thing. You know, we wanted the humor, we wanted the lightness to it, but at the end of the day, we wanted to kind of like, you know, hit people in the gut with it.
Many of the people involved with Fallout and Baldur's Gate remember that, as their projects concluded, they had started to realize what special games they had created. But their success never felt like a guarantee to the teams.
The marketing director at Interplay felt that Baldur's Gate was going to sell more than 1 million copies, and everyone thought he was crazy. You know, we were all hoping that if we hit 100,000, we could do a sequel, and we could continue to do this whole game development thing. It'd be really cool. And then he was right. In fact, he wasn't even right, because we went beyond that. So it was a surprise.
For Fallout, the verdict was rendered less in sales and more in the terms of legacy.
It seemed like everybody who loved Fallout got into either game development or into the press. So it kind of kept the cult of Fallout alive, because the press really liked it.
It took time for the impact of that legacy to become clear. Baldur's Gate and Fallout inaugurated an RPG golden age, but it felt short-lived.
So about 10 years ago, I got asked the question, where did the isometric RPGs went? Where did they go? And I didn't have a really good answer. The only answer I had was, I don't know who convinced who, but in the early 2000s, someone convinced everybody that the PC was dead and consoles were the future.
But in the end, the foundations laid by Baldur's Gate and Fallout proved strong enough to establish a modern-day renaissance that would once again change the face of RPGs.
It's almost like a genre got killed, not because people didn't want those games anymore. Now, maybe they would have gotten more sick of them as time went on, but I think we still had a lot more to say and do after Baldur's Gate 2 and then Icewind Dale 2, and even, you know, when we were working on Van Buren, so the second version of Fallout 3, because there was 3 Fallout 3s. And so it's interesting. It's interesting that kind of went away. And I always felt if we could have been funded, if we could have made them, that they really were still relevant. And I think now, as you see with, you know, now that you see with Divinity Original Sin and all those kind of things, they really are.
Next time on Game Changers, how a husband and wife team kickstarted a new direction for video games with an extremely unlikely project.